Good morning, everyone. My name is Emiliano Diaz. I am the Men's Engagement Specialist. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for the virtual summit on male identified survivors of sexual violence. Again, we want to welcome you and we want to thank you for joining us. We want to especially thank those folks in the audience who are survivors themselves, especially the male survivors who are joining us today. We want to thank you, and I want you to know that today is centered on you. And so before we begin, I want to pass the mic to our CEO, Rose Luna, who will be sharing some opening comments with us.
Thank you, Emiliano, and good morning, everyone. I am so heartened to see not only so many people from Texas, our friends here in Texas, but to see so many people from across the country. This is just, again, the only word I can come up with is heartening. It's inspiring to see that we have so many folks that want to come together to address this topic that, to be honest, I think it's okay to go ahead and admit it, that we have not done the best that we could as service providers for sexual assault. And we are working to do better. I know, at TAASA, our approach to serving survivors of sexual assault is to always have that intersectional lens, to really take the time to understand the uniqueness of that individual in front of you, and to kind of put the options accordingly, right? Or just to respond accordingly. If someone speaks Spanish, we should speak Spanish back, or have access, meaningful access in that way and in a multitude of other ways. And then, we know that sexual assault, there is a stigma attached to sexual assault just in general, even for women who, in our society, that's the expected, you expect to see that women are going to be the survivors or the victims, of sexual assault. So when we start talking about male survivors, there's a whole nother layer of complication. There's a whole nother layer of barriers to access, starting with even societal expectations that kind of sets that first really high barrier. And then second, to come forward and just to know where to go, and to know where help is. I know you'll hear from Brad here later. We were having an initial pre-conversation to this, and that was one of the things that we mentioned. We were talking about how we're trying to learn more about what our rape crisis centers in Texas are doing. And I know Emiliano did a survey and we found out a lot of information. And then also when we do our service directory, to make sure that those in Texas know where they can go to get help if they are a survivor, that we're going to dig deeper to find where are those services for men. But then that still leaves the question, how do we get this information? How do we create that awareness? And how do we break through the noise of that societal expectation and even talking about this in a way that just makes it like, as a matter of fact, this is what's happened. How can we? So there's all these layers of complications that we have to go through. Again, not only with sexual assault survivors in the way that society, kind of understands them, and then we have the men. So again, Emiliano, I just wanted to really congratulate Emiliano for the work that he's doing. Emiliano's been at this for a while. I remember before Emiliano came to TAASA, and I was so excited. I had just kind of gotten there, was kind of still kind of new at TAASA. I'd been there for a couple of years or something like that. And he was doing men's work in South Texas. And that blew my mind, how that was going and how he was doing. And then when I heard that he was coming to TAASA, I was so excited. And Emiliano has not disappointed. And here he is on a statewide level and national level doing the same work. So we could not have a better individual at the helm of this. And Emiliano, I just wanted to say to you and to all of the other male survivors, if you're on this call, that I just apologize for taking so long as an organization, as an advocate, that we're here in 2022 and we're just kind of now we scratched the surface back then, and then we kind of let it go. And then, we have that commitment to do this more. And Emiliano, I know that you can't do this yourself. So I just wanted to put that out there. But thank you all. again, so much for being here. I love that this is that first step in how we can begin to start those conversations and how we can do better. So any ideas that are shared here, any other ideas, please feel free to contact any of our staff so that we can collectively put our heads together along with Emiliano as he's leading us in this effort and go from there. But congratulations, Emiliano. And again, welcome everybody. Thank you all for your time today. We appreciate it. And I'll be here if y'all need me. I'm going to hang around for a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you so much for those kind words. And everyone, please give Rose a round of applause. There's a little reactions emoji, and you can share a little clap for Rose. Thank you so much, Rose, for those kind words and for welcoming us on behalf of TAASA. This event would not be possible without the good folks here at TAASA. So if you see them in the chat, please thank them for all of their work in helping to organize today's virtual summit, as well as our chat moderators and our support, our victim advocates who are going to be available during today's virtual summit. Before we begin today's panel discussion, I definitely want to remind folks to please take care of themselves. Because we are engaging in a conversation about sexual violence, I want to encourage you to take care of yourself, whatever that means for yourself. If you need to walk away, if you need to leave today's virtual summit, that's okay. If you need support at any time during today's virtual summit, please let an advocate know in the chat, and you can direct message them. So they'll be sharing their information with you in terms of the process of getting support during today's virtual summit. So we really encourage you to reach out for support, whether it's with our advocates, a family member, a friend, or a colleague during today's virtual summit if you need support at any time. And also want to encourage you to engage as much or as little as you'd like in the chat, because there are so many of us here. We definitely will be using primarily the chat during today's virtual summit. And so please share any comments, any resources, any questions that you have with our speakers and our presenters today through the chat. And our chat monitors will share those at the appropriate time during today's virtual summit. In addition, I want you to know that we are recording, again, the entire virtual summit, and those recordings will be available by September the 12th. And so you will be receiving those by email, and you are encouraged to share them with your colleagues that aren't able to attend today's virtual summit. Again, thank you so much for joining us this morning for the virtual summit. I did want to let you know a change in our schedule. Unfortunately, Jim Struve with Men Healing is unable to join us. He is out sick, unfortunately, and so he will not be presenting this afternoon from 2:45 to 4:15 Central. And so we will be ending the virtual summit a little bit earlier than expected after Javon's workshop this afternoon, that we hope you're able to join us for that. So you should all have the links for each session of the virtual summit. I am going to gather our panelists here to join me. And so let's see here. There is Brad. And there is Jorge. And we are looking for Michael. I don't know if Michael's in the house, but if folks see Michael, good morning, Brad. Good morning, Jorge.
Morning.
Thank you so much for joining me. We are waiting for one more panelist, Michael Gwynne. We know that he is currently working in Florida, so he will be joining us hopefully here in a few minutes. So our TAASA staff will look out for Michael, and if he joins us here, we'll make sure that he's added to the panel. Thank you both so much for being with us this morning. We are really honored to have you and want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So Brad, why don't you start?
Thank you, Emiliano. I'm Brad Watson, director and co-founder of Men's Resource Network, male survivor advocate, and an actual survivor of childhood sexual abuse myself. I've been speaking up, speaking out for the last 30 years, and I want to thank Emiliano and Rose and all the rest of TAASA folks for doing this. This is the kind of stuff I've been waiting for and get really excited about. It's just elevating this conversation and figuring out ways to make this conversation more mainstream and bring the male survivor aspect into all of the great work that most of you guys are doing already with rape crisis and things like that. So I'm just so glad to be here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Brad. Jorge?
Yeah, hi, good morning. Good to see you, Brad. Yeah, my name is Jorge. No, I'm a National Criminal Justice Director at Latino Justice Pro-Left. Yeah, I was raped in the county jail when I was 19. I'd come back from the military and I went down to see a girlfriend in South Texas and got thrown in jail for getting a little mouthy with a cop, which I tend to do. And they put me in a tank that was men who'd been convicted and ready to go to prison. And yeah, and I was beaten and raped pretty well all night. And that 2 weeks later, I walked into a Church's Fried Chicken and robbed it. I was like lost. I spent pretty well 27 years of the next 31 in and out of prison. Spent 27 years in prison for robbery. Got out in 2008, and I started doing restorative justice circles, healing circles, community building circles built on indigenous principles. And I finally admitted what I knew that I carried for all that time, but I never talked to anybody about it. It set me on the weird path, right? I got uber violent for a long time, right? Had to prove to myself that I wasn't a punk, right? So anyway, yeah, I'm glad to be here and talk about this stuff again. Yeah, we'll talk about triggering and stuff later. I have strange ideas about that. I want to thank TAASA for the work y'all do. The people who are here, man, hope y'all can find some sort of something here to carry back to the people you advocate for. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. Yeah, we're really honored to have both of you. Jorge, I'm sure hopefully you've heard a little bit of his story. Before you joined us today, Jorge is the only male identified survivor that is part of our Speak Up, Speak Out campaign. And so if there's someone that's so kind to get on YouTube and share the link to Jorge's story, we'd really appreciate that in the chat. Also, just want to remind folks that during the panel, you will have an opportunity to ask questions. And so our moderators will be capturing those at that time. So thank you so much, Jorge, for introducing yourself. And of course, we're still waiting for Michael Gwynne. We hope that he can join us this morning. He is currently traveling and working. So we will look out for him. But let's go ahead and get started. When we talk about male identified survivors, we are talking about anyone who identifies with masculinity in any way. So I just want to kind of elaborate on our language that we're using during today's virtual summit. And when we use the word sexual violence, we are talking about all forms of sexual violence, sexual abuse. So for folks who are survivors or advocates or educators or whatever your role is, I think we understand sort of that sexual violence and sexual abuse occurs sort of on a continuum. Today, we are exploring the experiences of male identified survivors. And so today's conversation is really focused and centered on their experiences. And so as we begin today's virtual summit, we want to center their stories and center their experiences. And we want to keep these in mind as we move throughout the day. We want to encourage you just to listen and to come to this conversation with an open mind and an open heart. We want to encourage you to share your feelings and share your questions for our panelists during today's panel discussion. And they will have an opportunity to respond directly to your questions. And so you can direct those questions at an individual panelist or at the entire panel. So thank you again so much for your introduction and for being with us this morning. So it's important for us to start by asking what do you want victim advocates, for those of us who identify as victim advocates, to know about male identified survivors, right? For the folks who are working with victims and survivors on a daily basis in whatever their capacity, whether it's at a local rape crisis center, a college and university, a law enforcement agency, whatever our role is as victim advocates, what would you like for us to know about male identified survivors? And I'll let you decide who wants to go first.
Well, I was going to let Brad go, but because he's kind of a pro at this game, I'm not. I don't know that I wanted to know anything specific. I think I guess one of the things is I don't want to be treated as if I'm porcelain. I'm not going to break. You know, I have had, being in prison, being Chicano, I've had people treat me in a kind of a paternalistic way, right? As if I can't speak for myself. They speak about me and not to me, not at me. Allow us to speak. You know, the introduction you gave earlier, the introduction that people give earlier about triggering and all this. I'm not sure what those mean, to be honest. You know, on the scale of healing, I'm not sure that there is no metric that says you're fully healed or you're never healed, right? I would think that you're exhibiting some sort of sign of outward behavior that is not considered, quote, normal. Okay, then there's something going on there. But I left prison 14 years ago. I worked my way up in a professional way. I have nightmares still about prison. I have nightmares about the rape, right? This is like almost 40 years on. I don't think they'll ever go away. But I tend to believe also that in my role as an advocate, in both this and in CJ, I have to scrape up those memories, and they have to be real. I can just spit them out like they were wrote, like they happened to somebody else. So I think that we as men, we are expected to act and walk and do things a certain way. And very few of us really understand what it is that women want from us. And I think that authenticity, I would hope, but I don't go around spitting this out to everybody. Hey, hi, my name is Jorge. I was raped at 19, right? I deal with it. It did not, there were other things in my life that pushed me into prison. It is not my defining characteristic. It is part of me. It doesn't make me handicapped. It doesn't cripple me. It doesn't prevent me from going on about my work. But I just want to be treated like a normal human being and not someone to be put under a microscope and said, oh my God, look, let's feel sorry for this guy and, whatever, treat him because he's going to break. That's not going to happen. So anyway.
Thank you, Jorge. I think those are really, important reminders for me, and I'm sure for everyone who is watching. Brad?
I agree totally with that. And if you're an advocate, if you work for an org or anyone or any group that is helping men or wants to help men, I want to make sure that you are accessible. How do I find you? How do we find you? As men, males, guys, masculine, we tend to kind of not have a button on the front page of the website. I've talked to Emiliano about this quite a few times. Rape Crisis and other organizations that do great work do not have a for men button. So I would never Google search that org when I'm looking for help. And as an advocate, depending on who you work for and kind of what you're doing, my abuse, my childhood trauma is probably not the first thing you're going to get from me. If I'm dealing with drugs, alcohol, some other, if I'm in the criminal justice system, I've been to jail too. I'm not going to walk in and say, hey, I was sexually abused. You're going to be seeing other indicators, drinking, drugging, violence, and there may be usually is an underlying trauma that's led me in that direction. And I think just listening and kind of trying to get to why I'm exhibiting all of those negative behaviors, how I ended up in the criminal justice system, how I ended up in front of you. There's probably layers to it. I've been kind of out there for 30 years. I've been clean and sober for 30 years and kind of started talking about my abuse for 30 years. And I just imagined that it would be way easier to find resources now than it was 30 years ago. But as I've been working with men recently and kind of Googling around and looking around and searching around, it's been still hard to find resources that are male specific. We have our own set of kind of macho issues a lot of times, society, cultural. We're still expected to kind of stitch up our own arm and just be okay and take care of things and carry the load. And I think as far as wanting to hear what we have to say, I think there's still a hesitancy out there, even with advocates. I know you want to help, but I think sometimes when it gets down to the nitty gritty, a lot of us and a lot of you aren't prepared for what we're going to say and don't really know how to deal with it and how to kind of get to the specifics of my kind of masculine men issues that are going to be right up front, my defensiveness, my hesitancy to really kind of tell you what's going on and tell you that I'm not okay and that I need help or that I'm sad or that I'm anxious. You know, it's been frowned upon for me to appear weak, and there's still a lot of society that considers men sharing feelings weak. And as advocates, I think just kind of acknowledging that and being conscious of that and giving us an opportunity to share what we want to share when we want to share it. I think those are the top of my list.
Thank you, Brad. I think, you know, I definitely want to encourage people to make note of these things, right? And really consider how we can incorporate these practices into, not just into our work with victims and survivors of sexual violence, specifically those folks who are male identified, but you know, in our conversations with the boys and men in our lives who have been impacted by this particular issue, you know, those individuals are more likely to share that their experiences with you than with a victim advocate, law enforcement officer, etc. So I think all of us, you know, hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared to have those conversations, to engage in those conversations. So it looks like Michael is in the waiting room. I hope that's true, or I hope he's joined us. So we will look for Michael here. If any of the TAASA staff sees Michael in the audience, please feel free to spotlight him so he can join us. All right, we'll continue and hopefully find Michael in the room, and hopefully he'll be able to join us. So thank you both for sharing your thoughts about that first question. So as I was talking about what can friends and family members do to support a male identified survivor in their life, I think it really, you know, kind of encouraging people to think about their role. What would have been helpful for you? How could a family member or friend supported you as you were beginning to share your story and beginning to be on the path of healing?
I don't know that I could have. I thought about that. Like Brad said so eloquently, we tend to walk through this earth, you know, in different ways. A lot of them are defined by gender and ethnicity, a lot of stuff, right? And we act in ways not necessarily authentically, but we act in ways that we believe people want us to act. My family did not know about, again, just like nobody did, right? So I was not going to have any expectations from them. I think it's different if you're someone like Brad, who's, I think, shared his story decades ago, right? And someone who just shared her story back within 10 years. I had a sister who, I have a sister who believed that I was raped by a priest or something when I was like 14, which didn't happen. And she is an example of what not to do, used it as a way to further her career as a journalist, and wrote an op-ed saying that I've been raped by a priest and that's why I was in prison. I think it was her way of seeking explanations for why I was using drugs, robbing places, going to prison. So that's surely one thing not to do, is to share publicly something that you believe may have happened to a family member. But I tend not to place expectations on people. Of course, I would have wanted them to say, "Hey, is there anything I can do to help? You want to talk about it?" And but that's what professionals are going to do. And I don't think you have to be a professional to know that some sort of empathy, some sort of being willing to shut your mouth and just listen, some sort of thing of, can I help you? But most people don't do that. Most people want to give you advice. Here's what you should do. Well, I don't need that from you. I just need you to listen for me for a minute and let me tell you what I should do. So yeah, and I think those are just basic social work, mental health counseling, whatever concepts that I assume that the professionals here tell people, right? Just listen, right? Ask them what it is that you can do. Don't try to tell them, well, have you thought of this and you should do this, and shoulds and needs, all those kind of words. Let's throw them out. How can I help you? How can I be there for you? I don't have, again, it's not anything that I asked for. I've never been able to parse out my pursuit or descent, if you use a better word, into drug use and criminality, right? Was that part of this? Was that how much of that contributed? Like Brad said, you have all these different parts of yourself, right? Was it my fellow Chicanos who were acting crazy, right? When I was 16, 17, right? Was it, did that contribute to what I did at 19? I don't know. I mean, I don't really ask the questions and delve too much into that. It's where am I at right now? So yeah, expecting someone to help me walk through this journey is not something that I'm looking for. If people tend to be abusive, if people are directive or controlling or whatever, then I just walk away. It's not like I'm gonna sit there and try to change your behavior.
Yeah, thank you, Jorge, for saying that. We're happy to see Michael's beautiful face. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. We're really happy to have you. So we're glad that you could join us. For folks who are watching, this is Michael Gwynne. So I hope folks are also familiar with Michael Gwynne, his story. We were very fortunate to have Michael Gwynne as part of the Texas Men's Story Project, where he shared his story of experiencing child sexual abuse. But Michael, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll continue with this particular question, but wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much, Emiliano. I appreciate it. Thank you, TAASA, and thank you, everybody that's watching. My name is Michael Gwynne. I apologize for my tardiness. I'm actually in Orlando, Florida, where I'm facilitating workshops with youth who are aging out of foster care who've been through a lot of trauma. So they had me scheduled at the same time, but I got there as soon as I could. So thank you. I'm from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, originally from East Texas. I work as I work for City Square Track. I work with former foster youth who are aging out, who also have a mental diagnosis. My job is as a permanent supportive housing coach. I experienced, childhood trauma early. I witnessed childhood trauma and sexual assault with my siblings. I met these wonderful people here at TAASA and the Men's Storytelling Project, and the healing there has been amazing. But I'm here and I'm ready to go, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for that introduction. So yeah, the question that we're exploring right now is, what can friends and family members do to support a male identified survivor in their life? And so, Jorge, I appreciate what you were saying, because I think it can be important and hard for us to hear some of these truths, right? And these are, again, the truths of this particular group of survivors. I do want to acknowledge that survivors, their needs, their experiences are really are different. That of course this panel does not speak for all male identified survivors. And so I just want to acknowledge that and just put that out. And I just want you to keep that in mind in terms of what they're sharing. And this particular group of survivors is unique, and have done a tremendous amount of work on sort of on the path of healing. And so a lot of folks may not be in the place that they are, and that's okay. So if you're a male survivor who is watching this, wherever you are on that path, the point of today's virtual summit and the point of today's panel discussion is to let you know that you are not alone. And so I just wanted to say that as we continue. So Brad or Michael, what can friends or family members do to support a male identified survivor of sexual violence?
I'll follow up on Jorge's expectations comment, and I think that's important. I have hopes for friends and family and how they'll react, and if and when I need to talk about things. And 30 years ago it was different. Small town Texas, when I came out about my abuse, no one was prepared for that. There weren't resources, and if there were, we had no idea where they were. No one in my community I didn't even know sexual abuse was a thing, childhood sexual abuse. So I think now, friends and family wise, I would just ask that you be willing to listen to what I say when I'm kind of ready to say it, and be willing to kind of have the sweaty palm conversations. Sometimes if there's something I need to share, what I found is, especially with people that are close to me, it's hard to listen to. It's difficult to hear someone telling you that they suffered a trauma like that. And one of those kind of taboo subjects, taboo traumas, childhood sexual abuse is still that thing that no one really wants to talk about, because it does make you sweat a bit. So being open to listening when I need to talk, and having that sweaty palm conversation, and not asking details. I've found that to be with men I work with, when they're ready to talk, they finally talk, and they kind of get into the, hey, I was sexually abused when I was a kid, and then bam, here come the questions. And a lot of men are not in the place is where it's like, hey, I'm don't treat me with porcelain gloves. I have a friend that is still not ready to really talk, and when his family asks him certain questions, it'll trigger him, and he's off to the races. So I think listening to what I'm ready to talk about is kind of important, and just acknowledging that I may have patterns, old patterns, and some of those are really hard to get through. They stick, and you get hardwired, and you're defensive, or you're angry, or you react in a certain way. And I'm working on those things, and I'm trying to be better. But that childhood trauma is a hard one to deal with, and a hard one to unwrap and unwind. And if you can just be there and listen, I think that's the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned.
And I would say, if it's okay, I would say that for me, patience and understanding. Patience and understanding. As our family members and friends understand the depth of pain and how hard it is for us as men to share and to get on the path of healing, if they understand that, then they'll have more patience. So possibly more ways to educate, to get them to understand, how much we hurt, how much it hurt, and how much we don't want to hurt anymore. But it's going to take patience from them. And I think they can only get that through understanding our friends and family, because it's hard, because we're men, and there's this stigma, and tough up, get tough, and it happened, and go through it, and you ain't over that by now. So we need to have them give us patience and understanding, and if we get that, then we're able to get on this path and stay on this path and not be derailed from this path of healing, this journey to healing. That's what I would want most for my family and friends, is patience and understanding.
Patience and understanding. Thank you, Michael.
I
can
third
check
that
out-
motion. That cowboy up mentality, especially like where I'm from, small town Texas, is, I mean, I grew up, that was pounded into me. And I mean, there are guys that would shoot themselves in the face rather than tell you, I am sad, I feel anxious. And the last thing you're ever going to say is, I'm scared, because that means you're weak. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, and thank you, Brad, and thank you, Michael, for that. I think there's just so many amazing comments in the chat. I just want to point that out to the three of you. So if you have access to that, or if you have the capacity to chat back with folks that are making comments, I want to encourage you to do that. But I just want to point that out. I think, and I also want to encourage folks during the panel, because they may not be able to see you, or you may not be sharing your video. So we may not be able to see your beautiful faces. So share reaction, as they're speaking, just to know that there's somebody there and that you're acknowledging what they're sharing. So I want to encourage you to do that today. Thank you so much for that. So the next question is, in your opinion, what type of support or services for male identified survivors is still lacking or missing? Right. I think this is an ongoing question for us here at TAASA. That represents all of the rape crisis centers here in Texas, and victim advocates and survivors of sexual violence. Want to ensure that we're able to provide all the services that survivors need, regardless of their identity, including their gender identity. And so I'm curious, just from your lived experiences, what is still lacking or missing that the folks in this room can really just reflect on and think about how we can improve those services?
Someone mentioned PRIA. I don't know how you go about giving service to people in prison. I don't know how many organizations actually do that, into the hallways and do that. And I don't know how you do it. Are you in an office in the hallway that says PRIA, that says rape counsel? I have no idea, right? That sort of advertisement, any sort of movement from an individual who's in prison who is suspected to be seeking, not just, God forbid, some sort of assistance to walk through what they're feeling if they've been raped, or if they're continually being raped. And just seeking basic mental health services, psychological assistance, right, is frowned upon. You're weak. So how are you doing that? And there's different aspects of that. What if you're someone that, just like me, was in the county jail? It was a one-time thing, right? Or not, we mean that night, but that was it. And after that, I have a reputation in prison as being a stand-up guy who's willing to get violent at the drop of a hat, who's willing to help others with education and stuff. And now I'm seeing going into this office, what are you doing that for? That's a whole, prison is not like out here where you can walk and identify with people and say that and get, 185 people say, oh, how strong you are. Thank you for sharing our story. They don't give a damn about that, right? They're not going to celebrate you for having the courage to say that. So I'd like to know how they're doing it in prisons, right? Because I was in 13 prisons in Texas and never once heard of that sort of service being offered. There's maybe, you're lucky to be in a prison that has a psychologist, and getting to them is weird. It's a difficult thing to do. So how are you going about doing this? Are you setting up at the gates when they get out? And what is the actual process, and how are you trying to move through that inherent difficulty? Where out here, you can get statistics, you can walk people into an office. There's a lot of things you can do, right? That's ongoing. Those people can't go home. What's going on there?
Jorge, thank you so much for just bringing those survivors, into the space for folks to think about folks who are incarcerated or detained. There are a lot of folks here in the room who are working with incarcerated or detained survivors, and so a lot of really wonderful folks sharing in the chat in terms of their work, how they do that outreach. So we encourage you to continue to share, right? Because I think the best way that we learn how to do that work more effectively, and that is responsive to the needs of male identified survivors that are incarcerated or detained, is super helpful, right? So I just want to encourage folks in the audience, just make note of those individuals, right? And please share your contact information if you're comfortable. Folks are looking for support or guidance specifically around PREA and the kind of access that we can, and the kind of support that we can offer to incarcerated survivors. But I want to thank you, Jorge, for just reminding us of those survivors, right? And for centering them, and thank you so much. Brad or Michael?
Thank you, Jorge. As far as what's still lacking or missing, I'm just going to say all of it, everything. If you work for an org or anyone that helps males and works with males or men or masculine, please elevate yourself, advertise. We can't find you. I think that to me is still the #1 issue. And what I would love to see out of this with all of these people and all of you beautiful people I'm looking at right now on the screen is if we could get a list after this of everyone that works specifically with males and masculine issues with those weird kind of nuances that I was talking about earlier. I'm not always going to tell you what I'm really thinking. You're going to have to get to it, and there's a specific way to do that, and I think there's a specific expertise there. And I mean that's really what Men's Resource Network is geared towards. I want to find you, and I want to have a clearinghouse where when men need help, they can find it. They don't have to dig for 3 days or 5 days or 10 days and try to find therapists and support groups. I can't find you. I've looked, and I thought in Austin, Texas, of all places, it would be really easy to find resources. And I cannot, even someone with my experience of looking, it's really hard to find you. So if you could elevate yourself and just make this conversation about men being abused. It does happen. There's a lot of us out there, and just make the conversation more normal and elevate the conversation and elevate yourself and what you do so that we can find you.
Thank you, Brad. So we can find you, right? It should, with our level of access to technology these days, we should be able to find services, right? So I think I appreciate your point. And I hope folks I hope you come to this conversation with an open mind and open heart. It's not, there are folks, you're here because you care deeply about all survivors of sexual violence. And you care deeply about male identified survivors of sexual violence. That's why you're here today. And I think we want to do better. Like Rose said, TAASA wants to do better. And we are very excited about finally asking that question, that very explicit, specific question to our rape crisis centers about the services that they provide for male identified survivors of sexual violence. So when you access our directory in the future, you will be able to see exactly what rape crisis centers in Texas have specific services for male identified survivors. That's huge. And we have been around for 40 years. And we are only now beginning to offer that information, to your point, Brad, in terms of for other folks who are providing services, for friends and family members who are trying to refer and to support a survivor who needs support. So we still have a long ways to go. And I think that's why these conversations, this particular summit is so important at this particular time. So thank you, Brad.
And let me clarify, I'm not blaming anyone. And I've heard Rose apologize a few times for not doing better. And we have not advocated for ourselves as men. We have not asked for what we've needed over the years. And I think it's just now I'm hearing more men step up. And you know, years ago, Oprah had the big show with 200 survivors on it, and then that was a big deal, and then it kind of faded away again. So it's no one's fault. This is just where we are, and I think talking about it now, elevating the conversation now, doing what we can do now is the important thing. And when we are finally ready for help, it takes us a long time to get there. When we're finally ready for help, I just want it to be more accessible and easier to find. Thank you, Emiliano.
Oh, thank you, Brad. Michael?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, everybody is great. I'm just loving this. I appreciate this sense of community that we're building here. I appreciate everybody and the opportunity. Emiliano, you know, man, I'm out there myself, you know, being in social work, and I still struggle to see, you know, the kind of awareness that needs to be at the level where it becomes more normalcy to talk about it. I think we start there. You know, when we talk about services, it has to start with awareness. You know, people sometimes are, you know, not as, you know, motivated to talk about these things if they don't know that there's a desperate need for it. So sorry, I got background noise here. I would begin there. I would say that we need to have some creative conversations. We need to have an evolution of creative conversations that need to be consistent. I think we need to have some unique approaches to how we start those conversations, how often we do those conversations, how where we go to start these conversations. For example, I have just been added to a board for domestic violence awareness that deals with domestic violence awareness. Well, as a member of that board, I also am able to be a voice for us and say, well, you know, it's not just, you know, about, you know, women, it's about men. And so I become a voice. Like Brad was saying, I think we need to advocate for ourselves more. So that's how I'm doing it. I'm adding myself to these conversations where I let them know that, hey, this is what happened to me. This is what I needed. This is what others like me needed to even talk about it, then seek the services. I think the more we talk about it, the more aware the public knows that we need help, that it's linked to divorces, it's linked to abuse, it's linked to alcoholism, it's linked to drug abuse, it's linked to a lot of different things. Once there's a correlation there and it's more mainstream, then I think, you know, we'll find creative ways to develop services that address these things. And then it'll make it more normal for men to now say, you know what, I now see that, you know, because I didn't talk about this, and you already know my story, I waited till I was in my 50s to talk about it. I've already been through 2 divorces. I've already been through all that stuff. And maybe I wouldn't have if I had just knew that there was something out there and it was okay to seek those services so that I can get the help I needed. And maybe I'd still be in first marriage number 1 instead of getting ready to do marriage number 3 here. But at least I'm at that point. But awareness is where we need to start. So that's all I wanted to say.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I think, yeah, I mean, there's so much work that we need to do. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the survivors who are sharing in the chat. I want to thank you for sharing with hundreds of people your own experiences as a survivor. And it's an important lesson for all of us. And what's unique about today's virtual summit is that we did want to ensure that survivors, male identified survivors of sexual violence, felt safe and comfortable at today's virtual summit. And I have the opportunity to also share their story, to share their needs, you know, with us who are providing services, with folks who are friends and family members, who are allies, who are victim advocates, who are law enforcement officers, who are working with victims and survivors, who are service members, et cetera, right? So I just want to acknowledge and thank you so much for sharing your story and some of your needs in the chat with folks, and I want to honor that as well. So thank you, Michael, for sharing that. I think we have a lot of work to do, right? There are some just amazing survivors who are organizers and who are doing profound work. These are 3 just three of them here in Texas. There, other folks are doing really great work in their local community. And so please elevate their voices, right? Center their experiences, ensure that you continue to talk about like their diverse experiences, because again, no male survivor is the same or has had the same experience. So let's talk about our final question. Like I said, there are a lot of male identified survivors in the room. There are folks who are going to watch this recording later on. Is there a message of support that you want to share with other male identified survivors?
You know that famous scene in oh my God, the movie Matt Damon and Robin Williams tells him it's not your fault. Yeah, that you're not a weak person, and it's, my God, there's all these amorphous phrases and words that we tend to use, that don't really mean anything, right? Weak, strong, whatever. Yeah, that the person who abused you or is abusing you was probably abused themselves. And we live in a country that suffers from a lack of imagination when it comes to dealing with people who harm other people. We publicly shame them and put them in a cage. That's what we do to them. That's what we sometimes say when, I don't know if the prosecutor is here, we're talking about offering assistance for survivors, or what do we do with the quote unquote the perpetrators? But are we offering them healing too? It's not just a survivor of the immediate rape that needs healing. It's a person who did it because they were somehow set on that path. And none of it was their fault. They didn't invite that. They didn't say, hey, do this to me. Make me feel tiny. Make me feel powerless. Make me feel like nothing. Nobody invites that on themselves. So, yeah, I'd give them that, that it's not your fault. And try somehow, forgiveness is a hell of a word, but to understand that what was happened to you was likely this long cycle that began before you were born. And that if we're going to stop it, do we need to try to offer healing to everybody and not just the people who are saying, this is what happened to me.
Yeah, when we say all survivors, we mean all survivors, right? So I think that's, thank you, Jorge.
I would say you're not alone. Depending on the statistic you're looking at, 1 in 6. I think it's probably 1 in 4. And it's okay. It's okay to talk about it. You're not weak. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask for help. And like Jorge said, it's definitely not your fault. You didn't do anything. No one deserves violence, trauma, abuse. So no matter what age you were, it's not your fault. And I think specifically with males, there's some sense that we must have asked for it or invited it because, if I was strong enough or if I had done the right things, this wouldn't have happened to me. So I think that's really important. And I think Jorge said it great, but mainly you're not alone. We're out here, and hopefully the voices of help and advocacy will be even more elevated, and guys will know that they're not alone, because that is one of the biggest things that I felt and that I hear from others is this only happened to me, because I don't see billboards, I don't see commercials, I don't hear people talking about this happening to guys. So if I don't see that, if I don't hear that, then it must have only happened to me. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Brad. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, I would, like I said in the chat, when I met you, Emiliano, and TAASA during the Men's Storytelling Project, I had never told that story. I had never told anyone because my abuse was male and female. So I didn't have, you know, I wasn't very comfortable saying anything to anybody. And I think that's why it took 50 plus years to do that. So I just want to say thank you to TAASA, thank you Emiliano, thank you Josie, thank you Jim, thank you Men Healing, Men Storytelling Project, because you literally saved my life. For those men out there, yeah, I'm a social worker. I didn't choose social work chose me. For men who need to know that it's okay, I would say that it's baby steps. It's baby steps. If you know something is, if you step on a thorn or a grass bug or whatever you want to call them, and you know it's in there, and you don't take it out, it's gonna stay in there, and it's gonna blister, it's gonna get sore, maybe swell, maybe get infected. And so the first thing we do is we take it out. Well, I see this sort of the same way. I knew that I had eventually to get this infection out, this soreness that was stopping my growth, that was stopping me from doing so many great things and from reaching other men. It's just tough to find a way to be motivated or to motivate other people. But all I can do is just be an example of what happens when you do finally tell your story, when you do finally try to find that path back to healing. And support groups and other men and writing and journaling, that was part of my path, part of my healing, and praying. And eventually you're going to run into a group of people who know some people who know some people, and then it gets easier, but it's not a quick fix. So just stay strong, stay prayed up, don't keep it balled inside, and just, you know, finally find someone that can help you. Okay, that's what I would say, and I'm here if anybody needs me. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah. I don't even know. I don't even have the words. Yeah, if you're a male survivor and you're watching this, or if you watch this later on, I hope you take those messages of hope to heart. Thank you so much for that. I want to ask our folks have been leaving just the most amazing comments about the things you've said over the last hour. And but I want to ask our monitors just to look for questions. So if you have a specific question for a panelist or for all of them, please post it in the chat room. And if our monitors could call those out, that would be really helpful. So we want to just take the next, 5 minutes and sort of give our panelists an opportunity to respond to some of your questions.
So Emiliano, there was a question. Organization has MOUs as part of PREA with multiple prisons and jails, and the agreements normally only allow for 3 sessions, but most times they only get to talk to someone for one time for about 30 to 45 minutes. With one-time sessions, it's difficult to provide services. What do you think is the most important thing to address? What would a male survivor be looking for?
Is there anybody that, or Jorge in particular? I mean, I know you spoke earlier about PREA, and like, what would be the thing that you would want to give folks if you could only speak to them once?
Yeah, this may sound kind of weird, but like Michael said, this is a process. It's not something that you're gonna happen in 45-minute session or in 3 sessions. The first thing I want to know, what I'm going to want to know to at least encourage me to go on and speak to other people or continue on this path is, I hate to say this, but throw me some numbers. In other words, don't get into the whole empathic understanding at that point. But if you give me some numbers as to how how prevalent this is, that there are going to be a process or a way for you to get help when you get out or whatever, that here's what we hear from other survivors, that it has helped them. In other words, I'm not going to engage them and say, talk to me about you. And I'm like Michael said, I'm a social worker. I'm not clinical, but I've taken a lot of it. You know, I'm more community organizing, but I've also known a lot of professional mental health counselors, and it's like, they're going to open up when they're going to open up. For you to sit there and try to use a can opener and try to do that in those 45 minutes and push it all into that. If they hear there's other people doing this, probably in this prison of 1,400 men, there's 30% of them who are undergoing what you have undergone through, that you would, like, you were not alone in this place. You did not invite it on you. Neither do these other individuals. But this is what might happen if you pursue it. And this is, you know, in other words, show me that there is a door that I can open if I want to open it, and what's on the other side of that door, but not necessarily try to push me through it to those 45 minutes, right? There's no urgency for you to try to heal me those 45 minutes. I need some information so I can process. I'm here. That's a huge accomplishment, that I'm here.
Yes. All right, monitors, any other questions?
So another question, is there a preference for a man to talk to a male advocate? And to go along with that question, what do you prefer? Do you prefer when talking to an advocate to connect on similar situations? Seems that that would be a moment by moment assessment in a conversation. That makes sense?
It does. Thank you, Peggy. Does anybody have any thoughts? Do you have a particular preference? In terms of gender identity?
Yeah, I would say I have no preference. I regard a professional or an advocate as that they are able to, you know, not judge and, you know, be totally objective. So it doesn't matter to me if I've learned, because I'm a professional, that if they're in a position to listen, which means they have a heartbeat and they have a mind, they have ears, they think, and they're able to give just that listening moment, then it doesn't matter if it's male or female. I'm not worried about, you know, about that. I don't have a preference for me, because I trust that whoever I'm talking to, whether there's someone who's went through it or just really, really care about us enough to be an advocate for us, I just trust that.
I find it to be very specific, depending on who I'm talking to, survivor-wise. But for me, I've always tended to prefer female therapists. I don't know why. That whole thing of talking to a guy about that stuff, maybe just from way back. But today, it doesn't really matter. It's just going to be a vibe. It's going to be a fit. You know, I think it's very, very kind of, you know, kind of when you go in, if you're comfortable with this person. So whether it's a male or a female, it doesn't really matter. But I know guys who can only talk to guys. They will not talk to women about these things because they, you know, that perception thing. And I know guys that will only talk to women, that cannot talk to another guy about it. So I think it's going to be very specific depending on who you're talking to.
Jorge, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm kind of like Brad. I'm sorry, but the whole mother thing is still there with me. And I'm going to prefer a woman. I just have those thoughts. It's not that I prefer. It's that when I'm sitting in a room, the softness and what has been inculcated in me from the time I was in the womb, probably, you know, it's more comforting to me. That's a personal preference. Yeah, I mean, I know theoretically that they're all professionals, right? But my heart is telling me, like someone said in the chat earlier, you know,
Yeah, I think that's an important. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, I'm Brian. I just joined the group, and thank you. I had some farm duties to do, but speaking on this, good morning, Brad, by the way. He's my mentor and cohort. in Men's Resource Network. And I want to say that I'm a survivor. I'm a newbie. I mean, I'm only in it for the first year after coming out. But I will say this: at the time that I needed the most help, I didn't care. I just wanted a resource. I wanted a buddy, and it took me 5 months to find Brad, and that was the buddy that I needed. So if it was a female or a male, at the point when I didn't care if I woke up in the morning or not, I wanted to talk to somebody who knew what I was going through. It was just, I was just so fortunate that a mutual friend of Brad and I said, there's a guy that you probably need to talk to. And that's how it happened. So a buddy, that's what we need at the time of our lowest. I would have cherished any female, any age. I just needed a buddy at that time, and I was fortunate. And I think that's why we started Men's Resource Network, to try to give those resources to men like me. If you need, we're trying to pair them with whatever you want, a female, male, veteran, alcohol, anonymous group member, something like that. But that's what I think we recognize that we all needed at some point, and future people will need. So that's my 2 cents. But we just need a buddy at that time that we come out to our families and everybody else, and everybody's okay. Well, we're sorry. How can we help you? Well, we appreciate your help, but I need a gosh darn buddy. That's it. Thank you all for letting me hang out.
No, we're happy that you're here. Thank you, Brian, for sharing your audio and for sharing that. I think hopefully folks, I wish we had more time. We want to respect everyone's time this morning. We especially want to respect our panelists, their time. And so as we wrap up, I know there are a lot of questions that folks still have and that they've shared in the chat. We really appreciate them. Monitors have captured those, and we will look for ways for these panelists to share. I do want to encourage the three of you, if you are open to ongoing conversations with folks who are attending today's summit, how they can contact you, how they can support you. I know that a lot of folks are asking about the Men's Resource Network. So Brad, please share your website there and how folks can support the organization. But I wanted to give each of you an opportunity to connect with folks. So how can they connect with you? How can they support your work as we wrap up today's panel discussion?
You can find me mensresourcenetwork.org. There's contact info on there. You can hit me up at bradwatson.com. And either of those will work.
Jorge, Michael?
I just put mine in the chat there. And I also want to say, man, real quick, is that when we talked about, talking to people, male or female, if I talk to a male, I consider it advocacy, because maybe perhaps a man needs to know that another man is able and willing to talk to you, and that begins that conversation. That's how we let people know, that there are things that men need to say to each other. So that becomes a form of advocacy if we're able to talk to another man about it. So I just wanted to throw that out there, but my stuff is in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Jorge?
Yeah, I don't work in this field, right? I'm in the criminal justice field. If you want to help support ending cages and incarceration in this country, holler at me. But I don't work in this field. But if you just want to talk about this or your experience or whatever, yeah, that's fine too. I'm more than willing to do that. Thanks.
Oh, Emiliano, you're muted.
You're muted, Emiliano.
Thank you. I was saying, Jorge, hopefully you've dropped your contact information in the chat, but please follow and support Jorge's work with Latino Justice. He's very active on Twitter. But thank you all very, very much. And I apologize that we couldn't get to all the questions. I imagine there were hundreds of questions. There were almost 200 people in this session. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Again, I want to thank especially the survivors who shared their own stories in the chat, who are participating in today's virtual summit. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who is here, who is walking on the path of healing with us and with these survivors today. And we are eternally grateful for the work that you are doing in the big things and the small things, whatever that is, right? And if you're new to this work and you're just here today to learn about the issue, thank you for being here today. And thank you so much for joining us.